I'd like to call this meeting to order, please.
Move it.
Second.
And I'm not there yet, but I'll get there. Before I ask to approve the agenda, I'm going to ask everyone as a reminder, if you are not speaking, to please shut off your microphone so that our ability to hear is improved. We have difficulty hearing when mics are open more than just the speaker. So you got that, Mr. Crandall?
Thing.
All righty. Would someone move item 1.02?
Move it. Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. I'm a yes. I should say I'm a yes.
Robin, do you want a roll call?
If everybody holds up their hand, if we can do that, I mean, that's the only, if you can see everybody, Jean.
I can't see Dave.
He's across the room.
Let me do the roll call.
All right.
Mrs. Albagore,
Yes.
Mr. Cordone,
I don't
Mrs.
see
Cooper.
Dave on here.
I don't see him. Let me just look.
I don't know.
No, he's not on yet. Let's go to Mrs. Cooper.
Yes.
Mr. Crandall.
Yes.
Mrs. Griffin is a yes. Mr. DeJalorme
Yes.
and Mrs. Lyons.
Yes.
That is.
I don't see Dave.
I did speak to him just about 45 minutes ago. He indicated he was going to be participating. So.
He was here. We lost him. He was
Okay.
here. I just want to remind anyone that's viewing from the public that if you wish to ask a question or comment on tonight's agenda, I would ask you to please reference our email, which is on our webpage, the district webpage, the email, or you may call us and leave a question, but please make certain that you leave us your contact information so that we can get your answers back to you. It is our desire to answer questions. In this format, it's made things a little more difficult, but we will get back to you.
And Mr. Cordone is logging in again.
Okay.
Connected.
That brings us to item 1.03, budget update and review, please. Would someone move it?
Move it.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? I'm a yes.
Sorry, Mrs. Albagore,
Yes.
Mr. Cordone, Mrs. Cooper,
I'm a yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mrs. Griffin, yes. Mr. DeJalorme,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons.
Yes.
Very good.
Robin, Dave is trying to log in, but he's having trouble.
Okay. Can we get, do we have a number? Can we get Mr. Lisi or someone to call him? Okay, I'm turning it over to you, Mr. Polvino.
Right. I was going to try to get a hold of Mr. Cordone. It's somebody reaching out to help out Mr. Cordone, or?
I just sent Dom an email.
Okay, thank you. Well, welcome everybody here on this Tuesday evening of May. Just realized today was our actual budget vote. Had we been on time and never had COVID happen, today would have been the vote. We would actually have been waiting for the next couple of hours, waiting for that vote. So it's unique in that way. I just want to start off by I think it's always good to start with a celebration. We had one of the most amazing days here in the Fulton City School District with respect to, we distributed 350 boxes of produce today to families, and that number will be increasing over the coming weeks. Actually, we'll be distributing this Thursday as well. And then into next week, the Central New York Food Bank had reached out to us, and they have talked about the fact that that number could increase towards 1,000. And that's for anybody in our community. And I had the opportunity to load, I happened to be at Volney, and I loaded a box in a van where there were 6 children. It was just amazing, one, to see the kids, but to also their appreciation to see their faces when they saw the oranges, the apples, all the other great stuff in there. So I think it's always important, and it reminds us as to the work that we do impacts in so many different ways. So thank you for the opportunity to be the leader and have that experience today. I want to just identify the documents that you have in your files this evening. You have a revenues estimate. You have a 3-part budget by function. You have the contingency budget. You have the property tax report card. You have the exploration or the explanation of the fund balance that was requested by the board. That was hopefully at a little bit more understanding, a little bit easier, but we can break that down further. So we're looking forward to that feedback, because that'll be the document that'll be used when we work with our different stakeholder groups, because that's an area where there's a lot of confusion is around our fund balance and reserves. And then finally, the budget development summary, which is probably that's the key document for me as I start this evening's presentation. That's also known as Just Facts, but it's the one that starts off with the Fulton City School District. On the top, it says Budget Development 2020 through 2021. May 20 is when this was put together. So I just want to provide a very brief overview just to kind of tell the story, because one, for you as we pull this all together this evening, and then also as obviously for our listeners to hear the story since we started. This has been a very challenging time. And the challenging time is that, we started off in January looking very normal going into the budget process. Fulton was poised as being very fiscally strong. Our fund balance, our reserves, everything was at capacities. We're looking very good. We're poised well. We went from moderate fiscal stress a number of years ago to no fiscal stress, something that this board and previous boards should be very proud of. However, now we went into a time of unknown revenues in the current year. So right now we don't know. There's been talk of there's cash flow issues at the state level. There are revenue issues, which I'll go over in a few minutes. So those impacts, and if you remember, there's 4 quarters where the Department of Budget is looking at things and could possibly reduce. And one of those times is in that April-May window, and in the June window, and then in a December window and a March window. So just reminding you of those and reductions that could happen. So let's go down to the fiscal part, because the top part will actually be reviewed at the end. So to give you a bit of a timeline, the governor indicated that we had a $6 billion revenue gap due to Medicaid that was actually announced back in December and January. So there was a deficit in this state to start with. In January in the executive run, we had a $604,000 bump that looked great. That was very consistent with previous years in our foundation aid. And then normally in that second bump in April, we normally would see another $300,000 to $400,000, bringing us in right around $1 million. Been pretty consistent. Then what happened was on February 4th, we did a roll forward budget for the board. It's kind of where we started. And our roll forward budget was $75,882,000. That was based on a 3.25% salary increase. It was a 1% increase in non-salary and 7% benefits. Conservative, but in a way that we could really, if you remember, our health costs have been up this year, so we were rather conservative here. And then it happened. COVID-19 happened on March 16th, we closed our schools. In late March, The governor indicated significant fiscal revenue deficits due to COVID-19 in the range of $10 to $15 billion. On April 1st, we received our foundation run. We received a 0% increase or a $0 increase from 1920 to 2021. So again, the same. So already you see a $604,000 reduction from where we were in the original executive budget in January. And that's very rare to see that. And so that happened. Then we had a pandemic effect of minus 1,383,000. And then the federal CARES, that was the first stimulus, was placed back in. So if you look at that, that's a zero impact. Pandemic effect out, 1.38 million. Federal CARES Act in. We have found out that the federal CARES, when it comes in, will be attached to very specific federal guidelines. So there's very strict pieces that go along with that. The districts across the state and country experienced that before. There's very strict monitoring. There's very strict ways it can be used. And that really has come out in the last, we were onto it about a week ago or so. Ms. Connors and I were talking about it, and then it came up today in not only a small cities call, but also a meeting with the superintendents. So flat funded, and again, that 10 to 20%. So as you turn the page and we move forward, just to give you an idea, what does 10% mean? When he talks about 10 to 20%, just to give you a perspective, and this is still could happen. This is in the here and the now. What we've done is we've balanced a budget based on flat revenues, and I'll go through that in just a moment. So for 10%, just to give you perspective, that's $4.9 million. So if the government came in and said, we're going to reduce your aid package to the Fulton City School District, that means $4.9 million. And as I mentioned before, there are the 4 points: end of April, end of June, end of December, and end of March. Right now, and at any of those times, and the part that's a little bit unnerving is that we could experience those impacts in this fiscal year and the next fiscal year. So that's the piece that everybody's and we haven't gotten any guidance. There's been no direction. You may have heard the HEROES Act passed the House on, I believe, Friday. That's the new stimulus bill. My understanding is it's pending in the Senate, and there's a lot of politics that are going on around that. So again, our state aid was flat funded. So then we had a series of budget workshops. We did one in April. And when we entered in that April budget meeting, we had now reduced that 75 million roll forward by 1.64 million. How did we accomplish that? And that left us at 831,000. And so that was on May 5th, we went through this. And the board wanted us to come back on May 12th and further reduce, and we'll go over that in just a moment, to go with a 2% tax cap, and if we were not to use any of our fund balance and reserve. So let me bounce down here to this part where, how did we get the April-May, the initial 1.6 million? We reduced substitute coverage, we reduced salaries based on actuals, contractual raises, breakage. In other words, when a retiree leaves, it's less expensive to bring in a new novice teacher coming in, or a new administrator, whatever the case may be. You have breakage. So if you had a $90,000 position and you replace it with a 60, the breakage is 30,000. If we continue on, we decreased operations and maintenance by 4.5%. We're taking advantage, if that's the right word to use. We're not going to have to purchase or hire summer cleaning assistants as we're close through the end of the year. So our base teams will be able to do that work that we generally have to get done in 2 months. We've been able to work on that. So we'll be able to do all of that and be prepared for opening in the fall in accordance with any direction that we get from the CDC, Departments of Health from New York State, and the regional reopening teams as to what exactly has to be in place to reopen schools. We moved BOCES technology line to administrative line. That saved us some money. We also reduced a full-time equivalent administrative position due to a retirement. We reduced 4 full-time instructional coaches out of the 8. All 4 will be returning to classroom vacated by retirements and necessary and the classrooms need to be filled due to enrollments. The remaining 4 instructional coach positions will be covered by grant, so they will no longer be on the general fund. We'll have a full-time English arts teacher, which will be a reduction at the secondary level. It's based on enrollments. The full-time, that was due to a vacancy. We have a reduction in the full-time behavior interventionist. The person was a resignation, that was a vacancy, so we're reducing that. There was also decreases in the employer retirement system, and the Social Security benefits decreased as well. And we had a decrease in miscellaneous salaries covered by the community school. That added up to 1.643 million. We were asked at the May 5th meeting, there was 3 options. One was to go with the tax cap, as well as $408,000 out of our fund balance and reserves. B was the tax cap at 2% at $423,000 with 0 out of fund balance and reserves. And then the third option was a sliding scale where you could adjust either the tax cap, the fund balance, both, so on and so forth. The board had us come back, charged my team with coming back on May 12th on the next page. And you'll see what we did. So yep.
I just have a question before you go forward.
Sure.
How does what's the effect or the purpose of moving the BOCES technology line to administration?
Kathy, can you address that, please?
Sure. Basically, it was just to let you know that the administrative portion of the budget would increase. It just has to do with the different services we were buying, and some of them really the way we're supposed to break them up. Some fall under administration. It's kind of strange. For example, when we use IEP Direct, which tracks special ed children, that falls under the administrative part of the budget. You'd kind of think that it might be part of program. So it was just some of those items that I was just trying to get it more in line. Want you to know that the administrative part of the budget would be increasing, because it's important that we keep an eye on the administrative part of the budget. Make sure that that doesn't get too much, take up more of the budget than it really traditionally should.
My notes indicate it was about an $80,000 budget.
It ended up, and it was just based on, there was probably a few more things in play there, but it did work out that there was about an $80,000 savings when we went through the BOCES line that kind of shook out, that we were able to take out of the budget.
But don't we get aid back on services we
to a certain extent, we do receive up to 82% on services, and every coaster has a different level of aid associated with it. So it's you'd have to look at each one of them to see. And I think in this case, it wasn't so much that we were not purchasing a service as it was that we had budgeted in a different area than we probably should have. But I think it's.
I'm not clear how we're saving money though. If we would get aid back on it.
I don't think it was so much. It was more that we weren't spending those dollars, so we removed those dollars.
Okay, so it was a service that we really weren't using.
It was funds that we had set aside in the budget, but we really weren't using those. That's where I kind of grouped it together when we had to move funds from technology for some of the items that fell under administrative instead of program. Part of it is just keeping the budget straight in the 3 parts that it belongs, that I have to report under.
I remember. Did that answer the question? I had multiple questions. Did that address that?
I'm probably going to have to get together with Kathy at some time and explain it in detail, because I'm not really clear, as David was saying, I'm not clear as to how that saves us money by moving from one line.
Perhaps the wording shouldn't have been so much as saving, as just we realized that there were funds that we could put elsewhere, that we didn't have to use it between there's an area in the budget that's called central data processing, and that's administrative. And then there's the technology portion of the budget, and that falls under the program part of the budget. So what we were experiencing was that the way it should be coded is that some of these coasters fell under administrative, and when we took a really good look at it, we had to put more money under the administrative portion, which we always try to avoid. But we realized that there was about $80,000 that we had perhaps over budgeted based on what we expected our services to be. So we kind of netted it all together, just in that explanation. I know it's about as clear as mud.
Is it the kind of thing, if you don't use it, you lose it next year? That's the only thing I can equate it to with Navy terms. If we didn't use all of our budget, they didn't give it to us the following year. So
I guess in a way you could say that. In this case, if we spend the money on the BOCES services, we're going to receive some level of aid back the following year.
okay.
But if we don't need to purchase the service, I probably shouldn't have a budgeted dollar amount there, because it should be used someplace that it's needed.
Okay.
So it was more examining the budget. And, in one year we might pay for something that has an initial startup cost, and the next year it's going to be a lower cost. And sometimes between all the programs that we get into, the different software and the renewals, sometimes you kind of lose track of some of that. And we kind of saw that we could pull a little bit out of there. Not going to cut the technology budget, but we just took what we needed to put it in places where we needed to use it.
Okay.
So you got to remember, we went with a roll forward, and we're chipping away back and building it back down. So I think we found 80,000. So that's what we're doing. We're kind of shaving, reducing, reducing. And that was one of those areas where we felt we could reduce by $80,000. That's essentially what we did.
Okay.
In my words. I don't know. I hope that answered the question. So on May 12th, we came back on the 12th, and we did the following and as you can see, as you're moving forward, I want to remind everybody that every one of these positions, every dollar was serving a purpose in this budget, especially the human beings. And we have to remember that our positions we're about 74% human resources. And so education is a human resource driven area. So reduce the general ed teacher aid costs, comes out to 10 hours per school day, but 60 hours per day. So you got 6 schools, 10 hours. The schools are working extremely well together to balance that out. There's no layoffs associated with that. They're doing a lot of creative thinking to look at how those impacts are, not only on the students, but on the staff that are related to that. We reduced a half a technology position. It was a full position. Retirement, we only needed a half position. So it's a half of an FTE to serve the enrollment needs. A full-time music position due to a retirement. Alternate education, reduction in tutoring hours at the junior high. So we have students, if Jerry were on there, we could tell you, I believe it was approximately $60,000 in tutoring hours. So we reduced the number of hours. So what we'll do is when we work on our scheduling for kids that need to utilize that service, tends to be students who come to hearings, things like that, for disciplinary actions. So we're able to work on, or there's students that really benefit from that maybe more targeted program for some reason. And then athletics, and I can go through them. There's a number of teams in the areas of modifieds. We're talking about the ice hockey. I did receive a question from a parent out in the community, which was a great one. Just do the other schools know we were considering this? And the answer to that is yes. I checked with our athletic director. And then a supplies reduction in the superintendent's office. That resulted in the $408,000. And then I'll just summarize, and then we can have some discussion. So at the last bullet here really captures the essence of everything. So what we've went from is we've got a $777,000 budget that we're presenting to you. It's a $423,000 increase in the spending plan, or 0.58% or 0.0058 increase year to year. So it's very flat. It represents $2,048,000 in reductions from the February roll forward. And that's an important figure. That means we've already, from just roll forward, and we've cut her back, we've come all the way down to flat, with the exception of the $423,000 ask for the 2% cap. Now, please remember that at any given time, for the first time that I can remember, and I know it's happened in the past once or twice in my career over 30 years, but I wasn't in this type of position. You remember that the state aid, there are checks in April, in June, December, and in March. And we keep hearing rumors somewhere between 5 and 20% reduction. Remember that 10% is 4.9. That's beyond all of this. I want to make that very clear, that we're poised to be flat, and we're all hoping that, you know, the state aid or the federal aid comes in and minimizes those impacts. So that's that piece. So $2,048,000. So that's what we've been able to do and keep it as far away from our students as possible. But we also need to be poised to know that the next level of cuts, and at the last meeting I explained, column 1, column 2, column 3, if you will, they get closer to kids. We get layoffs as you move to the right, well, my right. So in other words, as you get deeper, it gets right closer to kids every step of the way. And that's what we're striving to not do, but we're to the point where we brought it down. And now, you know, those will be the tough questions that my team and the board will be have to address. Could be combinations of fund balance reserves and you know, reductions, all sorts of things to get creative to be able to poise ourselves not only for this coming year, but the years to come. And then finally, this includes a tax increase of 2%. Or $423,000. That's the equivalent of $35 on a $100,000 home. It's no use of fund balance or reserves, which is what the board requested. Maintains curriculum programming. There is no reduction in any credit-bearing courses. There are no layoffs. There's a reduction of 8.5 full-time equivalents or positions. There are further reductions will result in layoffs and impact programming. The Department of Budget and the State Comptroller reported on May 15th a 14% deficit in revenues in New York State and a projected $61.8 billion revenue deficit over the next 3 to 4 years. And if the federal stimulus is not received, we will experience reductions. Just a couple of things I want to share briefly. The budget is dependent, 62% of our budget is dependent on the New York State aid, 62%. So 10% of our 62% is very different than 10% of a district that has maybe 10%. 10% of 10% is much smaller. So this is impacting high needs districts and low wealth. And we are the ones that are going to experience this the most. As I mentioned, there are cash flow issues. There are revenue deficits at the state level. I talked about this year and next year. CNY school boards just sent out, I believe I shared that, and you probably get that through your emails as well today. Derek Dorsey, the head of that organization, sent out, he's encouraging school districts and school boards to write legislators to address you know, the impending reductions that may be looming. So I thought that was interesting that that came out today. And then I'm going to ask Betsy, if Betsy sat in for me at the small cities, as I had the superintendent's meeting was at the same time. So I asked Betsy, she had the opportunity, and what was very interesting was what Chris Todd shared with us was almost identical. We were comparing notes. It was like we were sitting in the same room. Betsy, could you just share the quote from Shannon Tahoe, our commissioner?
Absolutely. It was a pleasure to sit in. As many of you know, Fulton is part of the Small Cities network, and to sit and have almost an hour today with the commissioner was time very well spent. I was appreciated being able to be there. And she really talked about, as Brian had said, about this cash flow problem that is occurring in the state right now, and that we are in tough fiscal times like we've never seen before. And we are being asked to watch all of our spending as they are at the state level, because they are now not able to approve anything without having the approval of the Department of Business and Finance. So she said it's a dire financial situation. with very, very strict guidelines and contracts that we're going to have to be able to follow. So she just really stressed to us that, you know, in all the years that she's been involved in education, she has never seen anything like this. So we need to be prepared, in particular as we're watching our May and June funding, because again, that cash flow problem may result in us struggling to have the funds that we need. There will be delays, she stated.
I don't want to be Mr. Gloom. I think we've brought our budget down nicely. We're very consistent with our process. If you look back, I can only speak to the last 3 budgets because I've been a part of those developing. We've been very consistent. If you look, we've always balanced our budgets based on retirements, resignations. We've always been looking, this is a very lean district. We do amazing things with our resources, and it's something we should be very proud of. And this budget is developed in a very holistic way. It's about kids A through Z. I believe it provides supports for kids A through Z. Those of you, my whole career has been about access. And access means every kid needs to get access to address their needs to the best of our ability. And those are our social emotional, our academic needs, and all of the needs that kids, those complex needs that kids present. And with that, Ms. Griffin, I'll turn the meeting back to you as president. Thank you.
Can we have some questions about some of the information that we received?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, like, I know that, you know, because some of us have been at this for a long time, so we know we typically try to have the least impact on kids and staff, meaning that we try to seriously look at eliminating positions that are vacated by retirement, perhaps, or some other reason. And I'm just wondering if you can help the board understand how that puts us looking at those positions in particular is fiscally more responsible. Perhaps I'm imagining that. And I think that that's related to the cost for unemployment insurance. Like, what is the cost to the district if an employee is laid off? What is the cost, you know, to the district for a position that we anticipated needed to be filled, and eventually we have no choice but to lay somebody off?
Okay. So if a staff member is in it, then we lay off after we start, Mr. Cordone? Is that what you're
asking? I'm just asking, like, if the budget were to roll forward and, you know, we kept a position and then we had no choice but to, you know, revisit that decision and someone had to be laid off at any point, what is the cost to the district for, does that make sense?
Yes. Mr. Greer, could you answer that, please? I saw you beat me to it. You already are on. Go ahead.
Well, Dave, the cost of the district will vary based on the staff members, whether it's a professional staff member or a non-instructional staff member. The actual cost will vary depending upon their earnings. And this, as I think I mentioned at a prior meeting, whatever the Department of Labor Unemployment Insurance Division determines the unemployment benefit to be in the public sector, we pay the full shot. So obviously a lower.
Do we have insurance for that? Is it a percentage?
No, it's a budgeted line item. Kathy.
Dave, there's 2 different ways that entities pay unemployment insurance. A business, you know, out in the community that it has to pay into unemployment insurance, and they pay a percentage of their payroll. So if they lay off 50 people, it may not have that great of an effect on them because they're paying the same whether it's 1 person or 50 that they've laid off. Where a public entity, such as a school district, pays the actual cost. So unemployment sends us I think we pay it quarterly. They may send us a monthly statement showing us who's been laid off and what their benefit is. And that's basically what we're paying. So if we were to pay off, so it's whatever they qualify for.
There's not insurance is my point for.
No, there isn't anything to purchase at that point. We pay the direct cost.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yep.
And then the only other question, because some community members have reached out to me, and I think some other board members, is just particularly about the music cut, because everyone they know what impacts kids potentially, and I know that there's a solution in play. Do we anticipate that reduction in particular impacting program? And I'm not even, as a parent of high school aged kids, I'm not looking out just for high school aged kids or my own children's age group. I'm looking out for, because I know it, as a department, it impacts all the way down, depending on, they're all shared. It seems like there are many shared positions, and in that particular area, there are a lot of skill sets that are unique, and in terms of being respectful of that, I'm just wondering, do we know, have we assessed with that recommendation? Maybe my best question is, with that recommendation to the board, have we assessed the impact on program? The potential impact.
Yeah, and I'd ask, Ms. Connors to weigh in as well. But, from my perspective, one, we start with, again, when we're going through this process, we got some pretty specific criterion we use. One, anytime we have a retirement or resignation, the principals will tell you, regardless if I know the answer or not, I ask the question, do we need to fill the position, and why? And they've gotten very good at having the why already when I get there, which is terrific. And they're very open and honest, and it has to do, they always start with enrollment, especially at the secondary level, drives courses that occur. At the elementary, obviously it's a little bit different, but it's based on enrollments and sections as well. So that's the first question that we look at. We look at the secondary level, obviously kids sign up for courses. And in this case, we have a number of things that are offered. We believe, based on the plan that we've developed, that we can accommodate. In fact, we'll slide and be able to accommodate the high school's full-time needs that they have. It will have impacts at the elementary level. However, I think we can maximize the staffing that we have. I believe we have a very talented group of music staff that have great ideas. And, I think that it's better to be having this conversation now. But I think as we move forward, I think one of the things that I will promise to this board, as I do with every position that we're having when we go through these types of things, is we'll do an ongoing, very tight progress monitoring. And one of the things I really haven't talked about with this board is we are as tight and as lean as Ms. Nichols and Ms. Connors and Mr. Greer can remember here in the Fulton City School District. And the board members that are here have experienced, Dave and Robin in particular, you've been through this a lot. And so you've seen lean, you've seen good years and everything in between. And right now, when we're going into these budget times and you hear some of the things that Betsy and I shared, we're going to progress monitor very closely. Progress monitoring not only includes what do the master schedules look like, how is everything coherently fitting together, how are we making sure that we're getting feedback from the teachers in those roles to make sure we're doing what we need to do. And my goal with any time we do anything, I think you can get stronger in some cases because you get an opportunity to work together differently. And I think it's an opportunity for us to actually expand on the gifts and talents of our staff to help us serve the needs of our kids. I think we'll look for feedback from our kids. We'll look for feedback from our parents and community members, and we'll monitor very closely. So that's my best answer for that at this point in time. Betsy, would you add anything to that?
And
I'll let Mr. Cordone go first. Go ahead. You had something else to say.
I was just going to say I'm hopeful that we won't look in one particular department just because of convenience of a retirement. From this point forward, or at any point. And I know that you all have you have a great challenge to put together a budget to minimize impact. I get it all. But you know, one of the things that is hard for the community is to have, you know, opportunities limited for kids. And I just hope that even if the next that becomes a possibility is not just seized on just because, you know what I mean, it's fiscally makes the most sense. I hope that we truly, I'm glad to hear that you're saying that we're going to progress monitor, because I think that's essential. I think the community needs to be reassured of that as well, that we do have, you know, a method and an approach that does the best for all and provides the most opportunity for kids, because that's what we're all committed to. So thank you. Go ahead, Mrs. Connors.
The only thing I would add is, you know, I've had the opportunity to be here for a long time. I remember the budget cuts of the 90s. I remember Mrs. Griffin. I think I was one of the ones that even waddled up 9 months pregnant to have a conversation with the board at that time. So I remember, and I know the passion. There is no cut, even since the 90s, that we ever make that is not taken very much to heart. I don't care what department it is. And one of the things I can say is that we have looked at the music and we are not impacting program. I will tell you that when we did cut 4th grade orchestra, we impacted program. This is a different cut. So I want to be very clear on that. 4th grade orchestra impacted program. This cut does impact the way we deliver as far as what teacher will be in front of the students. That was going to happen anyways, and there will be some traveling of our elementary. But we also remember, as Mr. Polvino has said through this whole process, we have an obligation also to right size. And so you all know that we have lowered the number of sections in all our schools. Granby, and so for the community to understand, Granby, Fairgrave, and Lanigan are all the same size with 21 sections, and Volney has 14 sections. When we look at those sections and we look at general music, and then we look at our performing groups on top of that, the budget that we're proposing, the spending plan, allows us to continue to do that. So I just want to make sure that there's a lot of moving parts when we talk about music, but just like we cut phys ed, just like we cut the sports teams and we cut 0.5 of technology, everything does, yes, make it tighter for us, as Mr. Polvino said, as we look at master scheduling. But it does not change the offerings that our students will have for the 2021 school year.
I think that's the most important piece, Betsy. Thank you.
All right. Who would like to go next? Can you raise your hand, or who would like to go next, colleagues? Mrs. Apple?
I just want to ask a quick question. With the traveling between the buildings, doesn't that per se cut into the program for, I mean, once you're traveling, you're not necessarily there for those kids. And I know some of those elementary buildings have put in some great programs that they may not be able to continue. Maybe perhaps if they've got like time where the kids come down for extra help, whether it be with a musical instrument or maybe like a glee club or something, or when the weather's bad, like that might put into play the travel between the buildings. Are we sure that's not going to impact our program? And then my next question too is, at the high school level, if we're moving things around and people are coming around and we do put that full-time person over there, is it going to be, as our students going to be able to still be taking the classes they need to take? Well, you know what I mean? You're saying you're going to bring some other teachers in there to kind of help with lessons and whatnot. How does that look? I guess I just kind of need to see how that looks to feel like, is that really going to work? I'm just not sold that that's not going to impact our students and then take away from the younger grades. Eventually it will deplete, or maybe our kids just won't know their love for music or won't have the opportunity to get up to where they're in junior high and the high school if their teachers are all moving around. How does that look? I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'll address the high school part. One of the things is where it'll be as it is now. So the high school program is as it is now. There will be no, it is as it is now. What that means is the way it is, the music, or what do they call it? The chorus lessons or vocal lessons, I'm sorry, which, by the way, are not officially in the curriculum, which is part of the issue. Also, I want to take a good look to see at our music theory and look at that. There are some college credit opportunities that we may be able to build into this for kids. And what a great opportunity, because I've heard that some of those kids, I think somebody shared me the other day, and it's wonderful that I think it's at 5 students, 3 to 5 students are going on for music, possible degrees when they graduate. So I think those are some things. There are so many things that we can explore. As far as the elementary, and Betsy, chime in at any time, but you know, we have a number of teachers that move between schools. That's not unheard of. And I have been around education for over 30 years and in districts where you had to share staff and do things. And the key is the opportunity for us to work together and make sure we maximize it. Too often we put together a schedule and then we don't talk about it, and it happens what you're talking about. And what I believe is by working together and checking, and in this case, progress monitoring doesn't mean just at GRB. Progress monitoring means every school that's impacted. The other piece we have to remember here is, you know, and I referenced it, if for example, we take a 10% hit, that's $4.9 million. And we have to put this in perspective. That's a piece of this as well. And if we can do this through tightening this and that kind of thing, now we've tightened down music. And Dave made a great point. Every time we look at enrollment. So I was talking to somebody yesterday, they said, well, this course is low. And so I took a look, I went right on and I checked the data, and that's in fact not true. That number is well above 15, actually it's 19. And that's the lowest course level. And so, you know, in that realm that had been brought up, we look at every single class. In fact, part of our meetings at the secondary level with both Mr. Kopani and Ms. Parkhurst, oftentimes in our meetings, we look back and we look at our kids dropping courses. We monitor those enrollments because, you know, believe it or not, you might start off with a higher enrollment and then kids really struggle or they don't want to be there and those numbers drop. And all of a sudden I've got 9 kids when I started with 18. And that does happen. So we monitor our numbers all the time. And, you know, if anything, and, you know, the secret about me that people, I guess, one of the reasons why I go to everything, I love seeing our kids perform, but also, and I love seeing them in athletics, I see them on the courts and in the classrooms and all of those different types of places. I'm watching, that's part of my progress monitoring. And I think it's pretty surprising how much when I actually sit and talk with people, you pick that up? Yep. And so that's part of it, is knowing what's going on. And I think the kids also are feeling more and more comfortable with me talking as well. And I think that's important. And all of that together is part of progress monitoring, and then also sitting down and having meetings. So.
That I'm not sure if people are aware of the amount of travel that occurs now in the music department. So the choral teacher at Fairgrave is also the choral teacher at Boundley. Okay, so people might not be aware of that. There's a band teacher, orchestra teacher that travels to Fairgrave. So there's already travel that occurs. So some of that travel may be adjusted or expanded on to meet the needs. So I guess that's what I would say. There are already these components that take place because of the specialties. I think even Mr. Cordone, you talked about that, because if you're a band person or you're an orchestra person or you're a choral person, that will all continue. What will fall in there then is the distribution of general music. And just much like we're doing, and I can't stress it enough, that we're doing exactly the same thing with PE. And I know PE doesn't have the specialties as far as, you know, the choral, the band, and the orchestra. But anytime we start traveling teachers to become more aligned with that fiscal responsibility, we do have to take into effect that it puts constraints on our master schedule. And that's why right now we're looking at it not only at the 3,000-foot level as district music, district PE, but then as that comes down to each building's culture. So we believe, I stand in front of you stating, we believe as the EDIA who's charged with Part 100 in this district, that yes, we can deliver the program to our students for any cut that we've made in PE, in music, in ELA at a time when ELA should be the number one thing we're focused on, and in technology. That's what I can tell you. Will it be picture perfect? There will be growing pains, but it will not be at the risk of, or at the consequence or the cost of our children. And I just want to be clear on that because I think that's important. It will require us to do business differently. I guess that's what I'd sum it up as.
And well, and I can understand that. I do understand that. And I would assume that you probably would keep buildings close to each other if possible, so that kind of cuts down on the travel. But speaking of at the secondary level, is this going to hold an impact for, say, our kids, since we do have students who do go on? I know we have a student going on to Crane, which is wonderful. Will this impact like those solo fests? Will it impact our NISMAs? Will it impact all the extra things that our high school level teacher will need to be able to do, with the fact that we are one less music position in the district?
I met with the music department, as I know many of you are aware already, but I did meet with the music department last week. And we had some of this discussion, and I will tell you their passion towards wanting to ensure that we kept that high school program intact. There was a commitment to that. So that I can tell you, we had discussion about that. We also, there are, as well as a parent of a musician, you and Dave, I can appreciate your passion as parents of musicians. There are also times when we can have students accompany the choral. They can be part of that. I know you had a son, Brenda, who accompanied the UPK for me when we were in our time of need and took care of it. And I appreciated that. I know in high school, I had the opportunity to accompany our high school chorus. So there are things that we can look at, even building upon what we've already done and not sacrificing, but provide additional different opportunities. And I think that's what we need to focus on, is that we may evolve some of our thinking, but there'll still be opportunities for our kids.
Are you all set, Brenda, or do you have more questions?
They may come up at some point. I don't know. I do have a question. I do want to go back to our reduction in the hours for our aides. I know we had asked at one of the last budget meeting, I think it was at the last budget meeting, how that looked, and you had said it was 10 hours per building. Are we thinking about maybe doing this on like a flex schedule, so it's not the same aide who's getting the less hours every single week? Because we know that that's pretty important to some of our folks who, are going to be hit hard in that area.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. In fact, the principals have been meeting, getting creative. I had targeted regular ed, really in this, but when you really look at, they're looking at how they can incorporate some of the special education, all the aid, because when you look at the hours, we actually could make some things work. And the other piece we're going to do is we're going to monitor that very closely. I've asked them to put together a plan. I think one of the things we talked about earlier was collaboration and coming together and working together and thinking out of the box. The 4 elementary principals are really working really well together and really brainstorming ideas about how they could make this as least impactful, to spread the wealth, like you're talking about, spreading it around. I think the other piece, and it gets back to the progress monitoring I talked about, is that if we know that person A is retiring or resigning for some reason, immediately saying, okay, how do we use that now to redistribute and do things differently, right? And reduce the impact. So I think that's what we're working toward. And I will say that I've been very pleased with the conversations with the principals. We've had a group conversation, and then we're in our cycle of individual meetings with the principals. And so I'm able to check not only the larger group conversation, but then have those individualized conversations as well about this topic. So this will be another one of those things where progress monitoring is going to be a constant theme. Really, and we had a long discussion the other day about the importance of systems processes, and progress monitoring will be more important than ever before. And I think a number of the board members, especially those of you that have served on the audit committee or on the audit committee, the importance of how auditing and making sure you're monitoring everything. We talk a lot about processes and systems, not only in the world of business, but in everything we do. It's kind of an interesting committee to serve on, because audit really is around, are we checking, are we monitoring, are we making sure that we're maximizing our resources? So it's kind of a neat thing. We think of it targeted, but it's really very applicable. And it's really about our overall operations of the district, and really looking at, how do we create that and ensure coherence across our systems? We got to be lockstep tight. And if that means the government comes in and said, you're going to take $1 million hit, we're going to come up with a plan as a team, and team meaning all of us together, the board, my superintendent's team, the rest of the team in our Fulton district, and we'll take it on. But it's going to be tight. We're going to have to be lockstep more than ever before, and we can demonstrate to our governor that we are fiscally responsible. I got a little passionate. Sorry there, Miss Griffin.
That's okay. Passion. This is the night for passion. Everybody's passion. This is the night for it. So, Mrs. Cooper, would you like to weigh in now?
Yes. Thank you so much. So I just wanted to kind of piggyback to Dave's point when he was discussing layoffs and the cost for unemployment and how the district pays that direct cost. I just wanted to highlight that not only would we pay the direct cost for the unemployment, but those employees that are dedicated to our district also lose their health insurance in the middle of a pandemic. And that is something that I want to make clearly known that I'm not comfortable with at this point or probably any point. So that really weighs heavy on me, even discussing, the word layoff. I just want to make sure that's known. And then Brian, I have a question for you. I know that the vote is June 9th. My question is it hasn't been made clear when those ballots are going to be mailed out to our community members. So can you weigh in on that, please, and let us know so the community is able to keep a lookout for that?
Yeah, I'm going to ask Miss Perry because she's leading this. Our goal, I believe, was by this Friday. The goal would be tomorrow our ballot goes. And we're working with City. City is actually doing the stuffing of the ballots. And if you're not familiar, it's 3 envelopes. There's all sorts of pieces that go with it. Miss Perry, can you comment on your plan?
Yep, you're correct. So tonight, if everything goes the right way, Brian, Betsy, Tom, Kathy will get the draft of what the ballot is going to look like. And once they sign off on that, then I'm going to send it to City. City's actually printing the ballots and taking care of the mailing, which was a huge load off us. We've got over 6,500 that we're going to be mailing out. So I would say today's Tuesday, probably Thursday, Friday, by the time they get them printed, stuffed in the mail, that kind of thing. And I've already had a couple of messages from people that they want to make sure they get the absentee ballot. So I'll check our register that we got from the Board of Election. And if they're on there, I'll mail those toot sweet out to them.
Okay. And when we know a date that's going to be mailed out, is it possible to have Don put it on the website and make a Facebook to let them know? Thank you.
Yeah, we've been working on a couple of infographics to get out there, and also on Facebook.
Wonderful.
So those should go out probably tomorrow at some point.
Okay. Thank you.
Great question. Thank you.
Mr. DeJalorme. Any questions? Any thoughts?
You woke me.
I'm sorry. Sorry to disturb you.
Going back to the aides and losing hours, does any of the hours that are being lost, does that cut anybody out of a position for which they would get benefits?
No, my goal would be, and we've talked a little bit about that, would be to try to, those that were receiving benefits, they would stay in that realm, which are our full-time. Those are, I believe, and Kathy's not right there, Tom, are 30 hours and higher. I believe that's the cutoff. That's our goal. And then many of them are at 25 hours. So those are our part-timers. So our principals are very cognizant of this. And so we would be very focused on, I wouldn't want anybody to lose any of the benefits they have. That's a great point, Nick, and I will reinforce that. I know the principals are on that, but some of them ride on that 31, 32 hour, line.
Okay.
Is that anything you'd add to that?
Nick, there wouldn't be any current full-time staff losing the benefits that are associated or going along with full-time status.
Okay. With full-time status, they would also be in that group that would lose hours each week?
Potentially, based on the way that the building administrators have made the adjustments. Mr. Polvino talked about flexibility in scheduling.
Okay.
Taking a look at occasions in which, if a staff member, every year we have staff members who resign to go off in other career directions. Having the principals take a close look at scenarios when that occurs and make adjustments that way, as opposed to rehiring in the same position.
Okay. The other thing is, in talking about the music cut, I didn't think I had enough information. So I went to the staff directory and I looked up all the names of the people. Somebody told me, oh, we have 12 music teachers, which sounded like a lot to me. So I went through and I made a list of who they were and where they're working. And I see that there are several that are going between a couple of different schools. So when Mr. Polvino told me that what the final decision was going to be, so we had 3 full-time music teachers, I thought, all right, that's great. That takes care of our problem. The one thing that I did notice, though, is as I was going through these names, there were a lot that just had music. So if I were someone to look at this and say, okay, how can I help by redesigning this? I wouldn't know what their specialty was. There were a few that had chorus. There were a couple that had orchestra. There was 1 or 2 that had band. But for the most part, it was just music. So do I glean from that that's just general music, that they don't do anything else?
I would honestly have to go back, Nick, and see exactly the list you were looking at and just see if it's maybe the way they were just listed on the webpage, because almost everybody has some sort of specialty. So I would have to go back and I'd have to look at exactly what you're looking at.
Okay.
I mean, I know what you're referencing is the list on the website, but I mean, I'd have to go into each school and have a better, deeper look.
Want me to send you what I made?
Sure.
It saves you from, I just went through alphabetically to look at what each teacher does. As a matter of fact, I found out that there were such a thing as a consultant teacher, which I wasn't aware of before. But I'll do that. I'll email this to you. Or if
Perfect, because as we get ready to update for our new website, I want to make sure it's clearly delineated.
Yeah, there's just, it didn't look to me like there were a lot of specialties. So, and I know for instance, Mr. Cavanis, I know he's a band teacher.
Correct.
But again, on the staff directory, it just said music.
That's what I'm thinking, that some were just, when they did it, when we did that original list, we specialized some, but not all. So we just need to go back in and make sure everybody's specialty is listed. So thank you for bringing that to our attention.
And I'll make sure I'll email this to you tonight.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
And I'm one, the reason I did that was I'm one that if I'm going to make comments about how things are going to be, I want to make sure that I have a solution. I don't want to come in and comment on something that I'm not aware of. And so I just wanted to make myself more aware of what each of the now 11 teachers were doing, and how could we make that work. And so somebody's already got ahead and done that. So anyways, that's why I was doing that. I just wanted to make sure that if I was going to question Mr. Polvino and his staff, as to how they came up with the way that they're going to do it. I wanted to make sure that I had something that I thought was at least as good or hopefully better.
Thank you.
That's all I have, Robin.
Mr. Crandall. Mr. Crandall, are you with us? And I wondered if you had any questions or comments you'd like to share. Mr. Crandall. All right. Mrs. Lyons.
Well, I really think that every single one of my questions and my observations and my thoughts were outlined here by quite a few people. I too am sad by the fact that we're having to shorten our music department. It's just one thing that I think really helps with our social and emotional well-being for our kids. Saying that, we've got a very tough budget this year, and possibly more next year. So it saddens me we've had to do some cuts that I necessarily weren't happy with, but I guess it has to be done. And I just thank everybody for their work. And again, hope everybody just pays attention, as Brian said, to the fact that how it's going to work and make sure it works well if we have to have the cuts. Thank you.
Robin.
Yes, Mr. Crandall, your turn.
I had my mic off. I didn't realize it.
Oh, I couldn't see you, so I didn't even know if you were trying to talk. I'm sorry. I couldn't see your head.
I was sleeping and I slid down in my chair. No. My question is, when we receive the ballot, can we fill it out, mail it in? It just has to be there by the 9th, right? Okay.
Yes, that's right. So if you get it on, say you got it on next Tuesday, day after Memorial Day, you could mail it in. It'll go to the place. It'll be then secured. And then it'll be secured until 5 o'clock on Tuesday, the 9th, when all ballots then will be opened. And then there will be a process. There's a whole process that you have to do to open and record a ballot through the absentee process.
Okay.
Which we can share with you. I know that Jean is working on it. Jean, anything you'd add to that?
I would just say that everybody's going to get a prepaid envelope. And the one thing that we are doing, and we're doing this through City, they have a BRM system so that if people don't return the ballot, we don't get charged for the postage, which is a good thing. So, but hopefully we're going to get a lot of returns.
Okay. Thank you.
One quick question to piggyback off that. For those of us who procrastinate a little bit once in a while, is there a postmarked date or a date maybe that is on your paperwork you're sending out that says it should be returned by this date to ensure it gets to us by the 9th?
Yes. And we're actually going to have a drop box at the junior high. So if people are out and about and they miss the post office, they can swing by there and just drop it in the box. And that'll be there from 8 to 5 every day. But 5 o'clock on the 9th is the cutoff.
And it would save postage.
Yeah.
Mrs. Perry?
Yes.
Oh my God, you're not counting on the post office.
I think you had said to me,
Sorry, Nick.
they have to be in our possession. If they're not here on the 9th and they don't get counted?
Correct. At 5 o'clock.
Yeah, I wanted to, by 5. So you've got till 5 o'clock on the 9th. And if it doesn't make it to the district by 5 o'clock on the 9th, it is not a valid ballot.
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear so everyone understands that. Thank you.
So those last ballots that would be picked up at the drop-off box at the junior high, like, so if you would pick them up a little after 5, therefore, or you pick them up right at 5.
I'll be waiting for you, Brenda.
Yep.
You can wait for me.
Count here.
Yes.
You're doing the count there, is that what we said?
Correct. Yes, we're doing it doing the count at the junior high in the library.
Okay.
So we'll bring that box in at 5 o'clock on the 9th and we'll start our process.
Okay. Just wanted to put it out there for all of my procrastinating friends. It's not just me.
Mr. Crandall, do you have anything else?
That is all.
Okay. Well, I think you answered my question, Mr. Polvino. I had asked you about an AP, did we have any AP courses? I had been told that we had an AP course that had very few students, but I think you answered that early on in this meeting. I think that's what you were referencing, that what you looked at was the answer to my question. So I just want to say I appreciate you found that out for me. I like to know, I like to make sure that what I know is accurate. So thank you for that. And I appreciate all the effort that's gone into looking at all of the offerings. I know this is something that's done every year. It's part of how we budget in this district and have for many years. I know that oftentimes people are frustrated, but to be fair, to my knowledge, administration generally forewarns folks when they see numbers starting to decline that they need to look at, that there's something departments have to look at and be conscious of as they use the numbers are part of the criteria. Board members do not come to the board table to cut. I have to say that for the general population. You come to the table and you hope to help improve, enhance, build, if you will, a program for our young people in the community so that they can soar. And this is one of the hardest things to do as a board member, is to oversee a budget that requires the loss or changes in programming and doing things different, because there's always that sense, even if we do it right, Mrs. Connors, and I'm not saying we won't, we have that, we all experience a sense of loss. That is very normal. I can assure you, I have lived through this a number of times. This is the worst. I want to say that clearly this is not a spending problem this year. This is a revenue problem. It is a very large revenue problem that we share with school districts across the state. That's different. It's never been like this before. In my knowledge, to my knowledge or years of experience with the school district. I would ask everyone to please join us, as whatever decision we end up making here tonight, recognize that we are going to pull together at the end of this meeting in whatever direction is decided by the majority of this board. And we are going to do our best to serve our student population. And we are sensitive to our overall community needs. I believe the district has demonstrated that in a variety of ways through this pandemic. This district has stepped up and taken on offering food that we didn't have to do, but we are trying to help every constituency in this community in any way we can. And for that, I want to thank the leadership of our superintendent and his team, because you folks have done an incredible job trying to find ways to be helpful to everyone. And I am proud to be part of your board, this board, that to support you in those efforts. So that said, I am going to, I don't think I have anything else left to say other than, yes, I understand there is angst. And again, I am very sorry for anyone that has to go through that. It is not easy. Nothing I can say is going to make folks feel better. Only time. And I just hope that you know that no one is making the decisions lightly. No one. So, Mr. Polvino, if you don't have anything else, I'll move on, but I want to make sure you have nothing else. So I'm
I just wanted to, all of the different documents are there with the 3-part and all of that. The other piece is, not that I ever want to think of the negative, but I am a planner. And one of the things that you did receive was a very long document. We don't have to make that decision this evening. We can have that discussion at our next board meeting. But the plan for a contingency, or if the vote perhaps was no, I provided you all a document. I think our attorney writes longer than I do, and that's pretty impressive because I write a lot. But she did a very comprehensive job explaining what would be our options if there was in the event of a no vote.
Brian?
the timelines are very close.
Brian, I do have to submit the contingent budget tomorrow. If they approve the budget tonight, I do have to submit that on the property tax report card.
You know, I knew that. What I missed
Okay.
what I meant was that, and thank you. But what I meant was our plan. Would we go down and want to do a second vote or a contingency budget? Yes, we have to submit all the paperwork. Yes, we have to have that on record. But there's a process, and the issue is that right now with statute, our vote would actually have to be a revote would have to be on June 16th. You would actually have to, in the newspaper on June 2nd, post in the newspaper as the first notice. In the event that our budget was defeated, our second vote will be on the 16th, and you'd have to go through the whole process of the write-in ballot or the ballots and all of that as well again. So the recommendation and my understanding from many across the region is that they would move toward a contingency because of timelines. It just is almost impossible to do unless the statutes are changed. And I know that there's a lot of push on the government to be aware of that, but right now that's where we're at. So I just wanted to share that.
So again, I want to be crystal clear for everyone's benefit that it's highly probable that if this budget, whatever we decide tonight is our budget, moving forward, if the budget goes down, we will likely go to a contingent budget based on the short turnaround time and our fear that we will just confuse and frustrate our voters, because we literally would start sending out material prior to the actual counting of our ballots for a revote. So are we all clear on that? Could you just kind of give me your hand in the air if you're all clear on what that is? Okay.
Yeah, and we'd also have to have all the expenses. So in other words, we'd have to have another 6,500 times three envelopes, all set, ready to go. We'd have to have all that because literally on the morning of the 10th or on the 10th, and we have to count until they're counted from 5 o'clock on the 9th, and then you just keep going until it's done. That on the 10th, you'd literally have to start the process because think about that. We'd have to have everything stuffed. If it went out on Thursday, they'd have to be back on Tuesday. I mean, that's how tight this window would be and the expenditure. And then if it passes, which I hope it does, and if it does, and then we would have had all that expense incurred already, and we wouldn't be able to use those envelopes in the future.
So again, I want to say that these are unusual times, which is why this is so significantly different for anybody that's viewing. This is really, all of this confusion about the vote this year is really related to all of the pandemic requests that have been made of all of us, and we've tried to change things up. So please bear with us as we work our way through this, and we appreciate all of your support in the community. I want to take a moment and thank Mrs. Perry. Mrs. Perry has had an enormous task trying to make certain that everything that happens related to this budget and voting is absolutely correct, because if it's not, we would run into problems. And she has spent countless hours and done verifications. And I know that she has been answering questions for a lot of people. And Mrs. Perry, thank you so very much. Everyone, if you run into Mrs. Perry, please say thank you to her. She has put in a lot of extra time over this, and it's something very frustrating because it's never happened before.
And
So,
she deserves vacation too eventually. I hope she gets.
Thank you, Dave. You're most welcome. It's a big team effort. That's all I'll say. Somehow or other, we make it through and we're on to the next thing. So all good.
And lastly, my thanks to Brian, you and your team for working under very difficult circumstances and helping this board and all of its members to get their questions answered and to help us to understand the issues before us so that we can make informed decisions this evening. So if you have nothing else, I'll move on, Mr. Polvino. You just have to give me the high sign. All righty. So I'm going to move us on now, folks, to action number 2.01, and I'm going to ask someone to move it.
Move it.
So a second. Do you have a second, Mrs. Perry? I didn't hear it.
Is that you?
Yes, it was.
Thank you. I didn't hear it. All right, Mrs. Perry, I'm turning it over to you.
Okay, Mrs. Elbagore?
Brenda, your mic's off.
She's probably making Tom a sandwich.
I'm still debating here.
All right,
Can you come back to me?
I sure can. Mr. Cordone?
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
Mrs. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. DeJalorme?
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons?
Yes.
Mrs. Elbagore?
Well, it's not how I really want to see it go, but I'm going to stand with my board and vote yes.
Very good.
My colleagues, I thank you. I know this has been a very hard evening, hard budget process. So I thank all of you for your dedication, and I'm proud to serve with you. And with that, would someone please move item 2.02?
Move it.
Second.
Discussion? Mrs. Perry?
Mrs. Elbagore?
Yes.
Mr. Cordone?
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
Mrs. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. DeJalorme?
Yes.
And Mrs. Lyons?
Yes.
Very good.
And again, to members of the community, a reminder, if you're watching and you have a question or a comment, remember you can go to our district webpage and find our email that you may email, or you can call the district phone number and ask your question. Please do not forget to leave your contact information so that we can make certain we get back to you. And would someone now move item 3.01?
Move it.
Move it. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? Mrs. Perry?
Mrs. Elbagore?
Yes.
Mr. Cordone?
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
Mrs. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. DeJalorme?
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons?
Yes.
Thank you all. Have a nice evening, everybody. You've earned it.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your support. If you have any questions, please let us know. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.